If you've ever wondered just how evil characters are within the Zelda universe, this video is the one for you. I've been going through every single Zelda game, having played all of them and analysed data for weeks on end. And I've reached what I think is a pretty damn conclusive list of how much time each Zelda character would spend behind bars if they had to face a jail sentence based entirely on their crimes. Already I've covered every Ganondorf or Ganon and half of the princesses within the Hyrule Kingdom. But if you've not watched the last video yet, go back for that first. The link is up above right now. Because otherwise a lot of this might not make as much sense as you might want it to. Then come back here and we'll go again as we count up the Legend of Zelda's princesses by how many years in jail they would receive for their crimes. And let me tell you now, this video, some of the sentences are just freaking insane. There's one in particular that's just like... Before we start, let's talk ground rules, because we have to have them. And if you didn't see these before, it'll help you to know what I will and won't be looking for. If you know these rules, I'll pop a timestamp on the video right about now for the ending of the rules, because I don't really want you to have to hear this twice. First of all, Zeldas are all grouped by adventure. So for instance, Phantom Hourglass will be spoken about as a separate game to the Wind Waker, but their sentences will be added together and they will be treated as the same Zelda for that sentence. I'll only be taking maximum sentences into effect, which means that crimes that can only be counted by monetary fines or misdemeanors just don't count. Some of this is going to be done by eye, i.e. if a princess kills or is the reason why an enemy dies, that creature will be treated as its closest counterpart, or what is based off of within the real world. I'm not dealing with personal runs on this and I'm trying to keep this as canon as possible. However, it's not entirely possible at all times and you will see why later. So my playthroughs are what I would call an average gamer play. This means that most people would have experienced and dealt with the same as I did, and I'm not counting secret passages or rooms unless they are essential to reaching the next area. Finally, this is the only time I'll address this in this video, but we're not taking sovereign immunity, or immunity to being punished via a criminal juror for being royalty, into account. It just ruins the whole point of the video and it's just no fun. So, rules laid out, let's ease ourselves in with a game that I have been dying to talk about on this channel. Somehow in nearly 3 years, I've managed to not talk about this absolute gem of a game. But here it is. It's time to talk about how disappointing the Minish Cap is. Based on crimes committed by the princess, nothing else. The game is fantastic. We actually start the game with her having snuck out of Hyrule Castle to join the festivities. Now, we're going to presume that she isn't locked away inside of the castle, i.e. being kept as a prisoner, which means that she's not an actual escapee, but just a child that's been acting against their parents' will. This would mean in this setting that she breaks no laws, but maybe gets grounded for a week or two for sneaking out. She organises a date with Mr. Bedhead himself, before leading him to Hyrule Castle Town where the festivities are in full swing. All the way through the sequence, she's pretty well behaved. Sure, she gambles, but there's no hard laws in place about gambling in a setting like a fairground, and she wins your shield despite there being a full heart container on offer. We then head up towards the castle to give the Smith's sword to the minister, and we get ambushed by a Deku scrub who is firing his nuts all over the place. Get your head out of the gutter, you filthy cretins. When all of this happens, she takes a shot to the face, before moving out of the way for Link to come into potential harm. At this point, I would just like to reiterate that Zelda and Link are closer to dating than the paradigm given in most games where Link is Zelda's sworn protector, and as such, she just puts him directly in harm's way, intentionally, almost to see if he will step in to rescue her. Now, we've got to act in this instance with a little bit of care. See, in this instance, Deku nuts are highly unlikely to kill. In fact, it's more akin to using a flashbang, as we found out in Ocarina of Time. Sure, they do a little bit of damage, but they're not going to kill. The law works with endangerment that the punishment should be taken akin to the crime. So rather than charging a life sentence for this, we have to weigh up what this Deku scrub would have been guilty with in order to pass judgment onto the good princess. We have the use of a flashbang or a projectile weapon, which is 5.5 years. But that's more on the general use and possession of flashbangs. But this here does actual damage to Link, and with actual damage comes bodily harm. There are two types of charges in relation to bodily harm in the UK, actual bodily harm or grievous bodily harm, and the difference between them is relatively subtle. actual bodily harm is a lesser crime, because it's less likely to have long-lasting effects on the victim. So a great example of this is actually in Ocarina of Time. If as the hero you use your slingshot, you're a lot less likely to cause actual damage than you would if you use your sword. The slingshot will usually stun enemies, whereas the sword will cause damage. Take this and put it into effect in the real world. That's effectively your difference between ABH and GBH. As the Dekus are firing Deku Nuts, a non-lethal weapon, and they have no pointed edges, you could argue no proper damage apart from a little bit of pain would be caused. And it's because of this that we've taken the extremely long-winded way around explaining Zelda's sentence here. In this instance, she's more likely to be charged with intentional endangerment to the effect of actual bodily harm, which would carry a sentence of 5 years. Zelda then hosts an award ceremony in which Vati is named as the winner of a sword fighting competition. It's during this sequence that he unleashes all of the world's evil, and breaks the seal on the foresword, before turning Zelda into stone. And that is the last that we see of her. Right up until the final portion of the game. We climb to the top of Hyrule Castle and find Vati draining Zelda's life force. He gets sidetracked by Link and heads into battle, where he gets defeated, allowing Link to use the Foresword in order to free the princess from her petrification. The moment we do, the oldest trope in the Zelda book rears its head, and the castle begins to crumble, leading to a sequence where Zelda and Link must escape. She's a bit better behaved here than she was in Ocarina of Time, and just stays behind you, not creating any issues whatsoever or breaking any laws. As they reach the sanctuary, Vati uses the last of his power to become a giant eyeball with massive arms. Link is sent in alone to fight this abomination, and once again Zelda is left in the background. Where she's been in this title all along, there isn't actually a law against this. She has zero obligation to aid Link, and she hasn't put Link at risk here, as it's Link rushing in and invading the castle that's actually caused this fight, and Vati's need for revenge. Zelda in the post-game is instructed to wear the Minish Cap to restore order to Hyrule, which she does, and all of the monsters disappear, setting the world back to rights. Which means that in the entirety of the Minish Cap, just because of her general lack of action in the game, she goes to jail for a whole, wait for it, 5 years. This one marks one of the lowest sentences of any character that we've looked at in these videos so far, and puts the Minish Princess directly level with Zelda from A Link Between Worlds as the fairest princess in all of the lands. I don't know though, I think there may be fairer in the land, so to speak, but maybe not in the land of Hyrule. Maybe we need to go further. Let's go to Holodrum and Labrina. That sounds like fun. These games are another one of those where Zelda doesn't really have much impact, but she is involved, so we kinda need to talk about her. Zelda's first involvement is actually in the instruction manual, where the synopsis of the game tells you that Zelda has told Link to head to the Temple of Time to check on the Triforce. He does so, and is transported to either Labrina or Holodrum. It's not until the very end of the game that she shows up, having had both the flames of sorrow and despair lit, and within seconds she's kidnapped by Twin Rover. You would honestly think that she would get better at avoiding these situations, but no. They use their magic, put her to sleep, and that's it. She gets offered up as a sacrifice to light the final flame, but Link gets to her and interrupts the whole ritual, leading to Ganon's botched revival and eventual defeat. Zelda wakes up and is seen in the end credits looking out from Ambi's tower into the distance. But what she's looking at is a completely clean criminal record. She commits zero crimes, doesn't get a sentence levied against her, and joins A Link to the Past Zelda as the only two princesses without a sentence. Oh, Zelda in the Wind Waker is going to be a fun one to count through. Unlike most of the Zeldas so far, she's actually probably got the most amount of involvement in the plot, and therefore comes up a lot in the game. She also has two forms, similar to Sheik, where she assumes the form of Tetra, the leader of a pirate band, before finding out about her true calling, to be the Princess of Hyrule and the wielder of the Triforce of Wisdom. The first time we see her, she's being carried by the Hammerrock King across the ocean, and her band of pirates are firing metal balls, presumably cannonballs out of a trebuchet that's mounted onto their ship. A cannonball hits the bird, causing Tetra to drop from the sky and into the tree canopy below. This, in of itself, doesn't exactly break any laws, apart from there being a cannon on this ship. Usually I try and fight this by saying something like, well, duh, it's a ship, of course it has cannons. But then we have to remember that this is specifically a pirate ship, And pirates but then we have to remember that this is specifically a pirate ship. What is wrong with there being a cannon on the ship? Well, to operate one, you need a license. A firearms license to be specific. Oddly enough for a cannon, a shotgun license is all that's needed. But without this, even just owning this cannon gets Tetra a cool 5 years. Hyrule, your baby sister, urges you as a child to go and rescue this girl that you've never met. Which means that Hyrule actually gets the first proper crime count of this game, putting a child in danger. Despite being a child herself, Link finds Tetra in the forest and she drops from a tree branch before insulting Link's clothing choices. Finally, her crew come after her and come to her rescue, where she then admits to being a pirate.
In the early 2000s, the coast around Somalia became very dangerous. Local fishing communities were rising up against large motorized boats that were fishing in their waters. The way they responded to this was by holding these boats and their crew up for ransom, which the newly dubbed Somali pirates soon found to be far more lucrative than just fishing. In 2012, 4 Somali pirates were arrested and sentenced. For the crimes of holding hostages for 977 days, 2 of the pirates were given 30-year sentences. The other 2 were given life sentences for shooting at the USS Ashland, which resulted in the boat catching fire with crew still on board.
So, at least now we have a vague idea on what we're looking at for piracy-based crimes. So let's take a look at how close Tetra gets to any of these. First of all is keeping captives. While Link is relegated to the hull of the ship during his travels, it is made perfectly clear that he requests to go with them. As a result of this, he's not a hostage and therefore no crime is committed. Sure, our Rito friend here does point out that Link is only headed on the ship because they came to Outset to begin with, but they didn't end up on Outset because of their pirating ways, but more because Tetra got herself kidnapped by a bird. In fact, Tetra actually does her absolute best here to discourage Link from his quest. But in the end, she kicks him down below deck when Nico gives us a challenge. Link has to swing from these ropes which have naked flames on them which... Seriously, are these the most stupid pirates ever? Naked flames, wooden boats. This would definitely count as gross neglect. Something that Tetra would be accountable for, judging by the fact that she is responsible for the upkeep on the ship as captain. According to maritime law, in the instance of a ship going down, every person that is on the ship is responsible for these tortures. So Nico and Tetra in this instance would be punished with up to 2 years in prison. Obviously the ship doesn't go down in this game, but the fact that these are just here. And if anything should happen to hit the boat, the flames would completely engulf the hull, give me a reason to charge both of them with 2 years. On top of that, Tetra has 6 crewmates and Link to consider as passengers upon her ship. By having these lanterns here, it displays willful neglect, which carries a 12-month sentence for each count, meaning Tetra, for just having a few unprotected lamps in the hull of her ship, picks up 8 years in prison. Nico next gives Link the opportunity to take the spoils bag, as a reward for passing his swinging on the torches mission, which easily could have ended up with the 7 of them dead on the ship. This spoils bag is very unlikely to have been on the ship to begin with as one of the pirates' personal possessions. However, there's no text to indicate that it came from land, only the acknowledgement that Nico doesn't want anyone else to find out about it. In this instance, I have to go with the evidence. And that means being somewhat lenient and giving Tetra the benefit of the doubt. There's no evidence to support her having stolen it, so let's just say it's hers. The crew land up at the Forsaken Fortress, and this is an immediate break of maritime law. Under instructions of sea laws, navigating in dangerous conditions is a breach, and therefore indictable. If it leads to death or serious harm of another person, the term can be 5 years. And actually, with the damage that could have come to Link on this island, especially if I'm controlling him, she could easily face 5 years. However, I'm going to assume that Link gets through unscathed without taking a hit or any damage whatsoever. This still leads to Tetra getting sentenced for travelling unsafe waters around Forsaken Fortress, which would give her a 6-month sentence, potentially rising to 5 years should Link get hurt. In the very next scene though, Tetra explores how to get Link onto the island, and... straight up attempted murder. She fires him out of a cannon. There are no ifs, no buts, no coconuts about this one. She tries to kill him, even winking to him in the process as if to say she knows what she's doing. Granted, the cannon in question is a trebuchet, and Link is in a bucket, and there's no gunpowder involved, just manpower. But the distance he needs to make it to, and the height that he gets, yeah, any normal person, the impact is killing them. Especially considering he splats up against a wall, losing his sword in the process. This isn't just attempted murder, it's absolute recklessness. And the worst bit is, either she's done this before, considering the line,
Trust me, trust me. Trust me. We pirates do this all the time. Don't worry about it, it'll be a piece of cake.
or she's an awful liar, which is actually probably what I'd consider to be more the case for her. She then talks to us through a magic pebble which she slipped into our belongings. Now the good news is there isn't actually a law for putting things in people's pockets. However, she uses this stone to spy on us. And we can see that by her just knowing that Link has lost his sword. The maximum sentence for espionage is 14 years, which this certainly is. So, as Link you climb the fortress. You then get swooped upon by the Hammerrock King, he drops you into the ocean and the King of Red Lions catches you. If this little red boat here is the one doing the rescuing, then I think it's safe to presume to some degree that Tetra's abandoned Link after seeing the bird drop him. In this instance, abandoning a crewmate or passengers isn't necessarily a crime unless the ship is in distress. But what I'd like to add to this point is where Tetra decides to make the decision to sail away, the situation actually does warrant one of distress. And as such, I can only point towards the captain of the Costa Concordia in 2012. The Costa Concordia was a major cruise liner, which struck a rock in relatively shallow waters. The then captain of the ship, Francesco Schettino, was found guilty of manslaughter, causing a shipwreck and abandoning his passengers, as he was caught in a dinghy which supposedly fell into the sea directly after the event. Now, this isn't exactly the same as Tetra driving away, and what she did here didn't result in any deaths. Although, had Link had perished, she definitely would have abandoned him. However, desertion is 100% a crime, and as one of the years of the 16 that Schettino has served is for desertion, I think Tetra should have that sentence too. Following on from here, Link is sent on his own separate voyage now with the King of Red Lions, leaving Tetra and her pirates to, well, pirate. Now, I can't count crimes for things we don't see, though I'm pretty sure she does carry on committing crimes, but as we're only counting canonical events in the game, the next time we catch up with her is just before the Tower of the Gods, where the pirates have invaded Windfall in the search of Jabun and his gem. They've kidnapped the bomb shop owner, with the intent of clearing a giant rock in front of Jabun's hideaway. Oh Tetra, why did you have to go and do this? First of all is the obvious. Tying up a guy because you plan to steal from him is still kidnapping. Kidnapping carries several tiers of sentence based on harm done or psychological threat. As obviously this is a cartoon-based game, no proper harm comes to the guy. But there is no way that being tied up, head to toe, gagged and having all of your stock stolen won't affect your mentality going forward. So this then gets weighed against the culpability. There are again 3 categories of culpability to determine the sentence.
Category A. Detention over a protracted period of time. Very sophisticated and highly planned nature of conduct. Deliberate targeting of particularly vulnerable victim. Use of a highly dangerous weapon or weapon equivalent to inflict violence. Prolonged or repeated extreme violence, torture, or sadistic conduct. Category B. Very significant force or violence used or threatened to victim and or others. Use of any weapon to inflict or threaten violence which does not fall within Category A. Planned nature of the offense. Other cases that fall between Categories A and C because factors are present in A and C which balance each other out, and or the offender's culpability falls between the factors described in A and C. Category C. Limited use of force in the commission of the offense. Limited planning or duration. Involved through coercion, intimidation, or exploitation. Offender's responsibilities substantially reduced by mental disorder or learning disability.
This kidnap was clearly premeditated. She next steals explosives. First of all, here is the obvious charge of theft. However, there's a caveat on the 7 years that she should expect to receive here. The kicker is this. The bombs that she steals are to be used for terrorism purposes, based on the fact that they intend on blowing a hole in an island in order to get to a gem, which again would also count as a conspiracy crime of theft. So she gets herself the 7 years for theft, another life sentence for terrorism, and then another 7 years for the conspiracy to grand larceny for plotting to take the gem from the giant fish. In this tiny sequence alone, Tetra gains herself another 2 life sentences and 14 years in jail. Pirate Zelda be doing pirate things, what can I say? When we head back to the ship to retrieve the bombs, Nico has not just taken down the lamps in the hole, he's moved them. Look, I need to point out that as captain, this would be Tetra's responsibility to ensure that these very clear fire hazards on a wooden boat would be snuffed out. So I'm going to give Nico 2 years in prison and his operating captain 2 years also. On top of that, we've got the same scenario as before. Tetra's crewmates are all at risk from this boat having naked flames in the hull. I can only imagine that the boat sets sail like this, with the lamps being exposed, so if one bad wave hits this thing then the whole thing goes up in flames. Link wouldn't be on board in this instance, so 6 crewmates equals another 6 years for negligence. She's just lucky no one died or sunk their battleship.
You sunk my battleship.
Nico then very stupidly gives Link access to his own bombs, which the group of pirates had literally worked really hard to steal from the bomb guy just before Tetra speaks to us through her magical stone. We've already charged her with espionage for this, so we'll just move on swiftly to the Forsaken Fortress. We don't see Tetra again until Link has climbed the Tower of the Gods and retrieved the Master Sword, where she helps him free his sister. She comes in with 2 of her henchmen, and after Link and Hyrule touch and reunion, the 2 break into the jail cell. But as these girls are being kept captive and aren't imprisoned by law, I'm actually going to let these 2 go free when it comes to breaking and entering. But this property does belong to Ganon, and as such he could choose to proceed with charges against her on the grounds of criminal damage. However, indictment only begins in the UK when we're talking about damage over £5,000. So she's lucky, but she gets away with breaking the lock on the door. But she doesn't get away with this one line here.
I'm sure their fathers back in town will pay a handsome reward for their return.
Now, I would normally call this ransom, but the law details this as blackmail, and in the eyes of the law, they're actually one and the same thing, and they're tied to a 14-year jail term. There's 3 of these girls. Hyrule doesn't actually generate a charge here as Tetra claims she'll deliver her back for free, but the other 2 will 100% be sold back to their parents, so she gets 28 years for ransom or blackmail. She then runs away as the Hamrock King comes to plague us, meaning that once again she directly puts a child in danger, despite knowing better than to do this. And because she understands the danger that he will be in here, she can have another 14 years. We beat Big Bird and then head in to confront the main man himself, who literally swats the hero away like he's a fly, before Tetra swings in through the window and jumps onto Ganondorf. She does no proper damage, but she's still 100% on the block here for assault, meaning that she gets another 5 years. There is no sign of self-defense here. Sure, she's stepping between Ganondorf and Link, but she's actually injecting herself into a situation that she had no involvement in, so unfortunately doesn't get the benefit of the doubt here and gets another 5 years in jail. She then finds herself in the hands of Ganon, choking her. I'm already regretting this sentence. Before a small birdman flies in. Yes, I know he's a Rito and he saves her from Ganon's clutches. At this point, Valoo is then called to the torture base that Ganondorf has called home. I am going to go ahead here and say that this incident of Valoo destroying the property of Ganon is not a crime levied against Link or Zelda, who in this case didn't actually know about the dragon coming to the rescue. However, Ganon is in the fortress at the time, and this is definitely attempted murder, but not on the part of Zelda or Link. But these Rito here who are clearly conspiring to commit murder, so these guys both get a life sentence, but well, neither of them are Zelda, so do what you will with that. We wake up in old Hyrule to find an old man in the ruins who takes Tetra's necklace and transforms it into the full Triforce of Wisdom, therefore awakening her true form. With this so comes the knowledge that she needs to be kept safe, and the safest place to keep her is at the bottom of the sea in an old castle that can't be readily accessed. So Zelda's involvement in the game at this point really starts to fade. We don't actually see anything from her until we've beaten both of the next 2 temples and collected all of the Triforce shards. We invade Hyrule Castle again and get to the top to find her napping. Ganondorf responds to her sleeping by refusing to fight Link until he summoned a giant puppet form of himself to fight, before stealing her from the bed and taking the princess to the top of the tower. In one of my favourite Zelda scenes, Ganondorf slaps Link silly for a little bit. before collecting the entire Triforce, only for Daphne to turn up and touch the triangles first and wish for a flash flood. Zelda wakes up, with the Master Sword in her hands, which is indeed a bladed weapon. The charge for this over here is 4 years, which she then duplicates immediately by drawing a bow, still considered an offensive weapon. Oh, Zelda, you silly girl. Now comes the big question though. These charges levied at the end of the game, would they be considered self-defense? And the answer is yes. Ganondorf in Wind Waker strikes first every single time. However, this is only in the case of Link. Link gets struck several times by Ganon, and in the end he has a justified defense. But Zelda? She's kinda just getting involved to get involved. I mean, during the main fight she doesn't get involved too much, but she does fire the final shot before Link leaps up, and if this isn't helping another person commit murder, I honestly don't know what is. This makes Zelda an accessory to murder. An accomplice to murder can get the same prison sentence as the primary offender. However, I hear you cry, this is all in self-defense. You're absolutely right. Ganon clearly strikes first. But killing a man in self-defense is still killing a man, regardless of the reason why. In this instance, the sentence would be downgraded from murder to manslaughter. Under certain circumstances, manslaughter would carry a lesser charge than murder. However, the maximum charge possible for it is still a life sentence. As a result, Zelda can only be seen as an accomplice or an accessory to manslaughter. From here she gets trapped in a bubble, rises to the top of an endless sea and agrees to take Link with her to a new land, meaning that in the endgame there's no more crimes committed and all that's left to do is add up her years in prison and send her straight to... Hold it! In my last video I mentioned about Zelda being under the age of 18 in Ocarina of Time, and while nothing's directly mentioned about her age, we do have to look at whether or not she would actually be charged with any of this based on the fact that she's clearly not older than a child in any of this game. So how can we determine her age to see if she indeed is old enough to be trialed? Well, it's a little bit tricky, but Link in the Wind Waker is old enough to continue the tradition of wearing the hero's clothing. His grandma states that he is the same age that the hero is, that is spoken of in all of the legends. This Link that we're being referred to is unlikely to be the one from Skyward Sword or Minish Cap, leading us to believe that the Link referenced here is the Hero of Time. The events that caused Link to become the Hero of Time in sealing Ganon away happened during his adult era. We already know that he's 17. This means that Link is likely to be turning 17 in Wind Waker, and Tetra is probably of a similar age. In the instance of the difference between 17 and 18, if she's 18 she would suffer the sentence of an adult, and in the instance of her being 17 she would likely be given a suspended sentence on remand, meaning that she would be given an ankle tag until around her 18th birthday, where she would then go on to serve her sentence. At that point in time, Zelda would face 4 life sentences and 102.5 years in jail. It's not one of the biggest sentences we've seen, but let's see if we can add to her sentence by looking at the direct sequel next. This one is going to be short and sweet. She gets 1 sentence full stop, and that is being a pirate. I actually think I missed this obvious charge from Tetra to begin with though when it comes to the Wind Waker, and she wouldn't be charged twice for it on the overall, just the once, which amounts to 1 life sentence. Tetra and Link are busy chasing down a ghost ship, which she then finds only to disappear completely from the world. And then when she finally does reappear, she is literally unconscious until the end of the game. So we're going to add this 1 act of piracy to the sentence already gained by Tetralda in Wind Waker, and then we'll come back to her and her ghostly adventures in Spirit Tracks later on. But first, a word from our sponsor for today, me. I'd first of all like to thank each and every one of you for the fantastic, wonderful comments, and also to all of you who have subscribed to the channel so far. We didn't quite make 2,000 subscribers, however, decided to launch the merch anyway because it's just so cool. This stuff is awesome. We've got shirts, hoodies, mouse mats, earpod cases and mugs all at a really good price. Just enough to help support the channel and pay for some of our wonderful artists' bills. All of the art is done by Splatter Colours, who's become an incredible friend and official artist to the channel, and is truly one of a kind with her artwork. With each Crimes video, I plan on launching a new character for you guys to support, and this time around we're focusing on Tetra. If you want to support Tetra through her rough ride in jail, go through the merchandise links below. Now, back to the video. And I think we should, before tackling the tracks on the land, head to the sky. How does the very first Zelda line up in terms of crimes committed? Skyward Sword, like many of the Zelda games, is very much a tale of 2 Zeldas. First of all, you have this really sweet, unassuming girl who is clearly head over heels for Link. And then you have the side of her that represents the goddess Hylia, who is honestly a lot more boring in terms of crimes committed. So at the start of the game, you've got to retrieve your Lothwing because Groose is yet to start his redemption arc and he's stolen your favourite giant pet. As Link finds out that his Lothwing is missing, Zelda challenges to jump off of a ledge and into the clouds below, before shoving him, forcing him to lose his footing and die a horrific death in the lands of Hyrule. Which is exactly what I would be saying if she didn't come to her senses and save us on her royal blue bird. But even still, Zelda starts off strong with an attempted murder, because even though she saved Link in the end, she still put him in that position to begin with. As the mystery goes on about where your big red best friend has gone, we find Groose bullying Link, having let slip that he was the one that took your Lothwing. It's at this point that Zelda steps in and, well... This may seem just like a small bit of her putting Groose in his place, but her waving her finger in his face and him coming across as initially shocked and a little scared is enough for her to have a sentence placed on her for verbal assault. Usually, the sentence here would be weighted depending on the severity of the assault, but as we're taking full sentences into account, Zelda would receive a year in prison for her intimidating behaviour. Once Link wins the bird race, she then presents him with a sailcloth on top of the goddess statue, where she teaches Link how to use the parachute before... shoving him from the top of the statue. What the hell is this girl's problem? Yet another attempted murder. The two of them from here then go on a nice ride through the clouds and then... well, she goes missing for the rest of the game. Save for the end of a few dungeons, where she's shielded by Impa and literally stares at Link with a certain lust, I mean love, that can only be had between a direct descendant of the goddess and her appointed knight. Zelda literally isn't anywhere to be seen throughout the game, and where she is seen, she does absolutely nothing, let alone anything illegal. The closest thing that she does to any illegal activity is when she throws the goddess harp, a cultural item, but Link clearly catches it and it's meant for his possession as a gift, so it's still not illegal. Fun fact as well, this is one of the only 3D Zelda titles where Zelda isn't even directly involved in the final boss fights either. Neither the fights with Girahim or Demise feature Zelda. There is this one little bit here though, where Zelda professes her guilt and claims that all of Link's problems so far are down to her, and that she used him to get what she wanted, for him to realise his potential as a knight and become the hero. I did sit with a little dilemma on my hands over this. But Link's actions in the game are completely his own, and she's not directly governing what he does or presiding over everything he does like how, say, Midna is. Instead, Link does what he needs to do in order to reach her or find her, but his actions are just that. Even if Zelda has used him, she isn't directly responsible for his actions, though her use of him is incredibly morally wrong. Then there comes one final question. With 2 life sentences and 1 year on the board, sure, this Zelda serves time, but does she even qualify under the base set of parameters that I set out at the start of the video? I mean, sure, Zelda is named Zelda here, but the formal monarchy of Zelda isn't actually set by this point in time. In fact, Zelda only decides that she wishes to live on the surface at the end of the game, which is presumably where she then eventually founds Hyrule. This, as a result, means interestingly that she will be the first in the line of succession of rulers. So this Zelda would never actually be a princess. She was never a princess during the game. She is the direct descendant of the goddess Hylia, and when she founds Hyrule, she is automatically the first queen of the sovereign state. So this would mean that the Zelda of the Skies is not in fact a princess, and therefore, even though she has a very small sentence anyway, she can serve that said sentence with the knowledge that she doesn't rank on this list, because she's not a princess. Okay, we've not got too many left to go. With that being said, let's go and see whether our 4 princess breaks any laws and see where she ranks. One of the powers of wisdom must be premonitions that mean very, very little. Just like the Ocarina Princess, she sees and prophesizes dark clouds, which leads us to Link heading to Hyrule Castle on her behalf. She is so paranoid that the seal around Vati has been broken, so she takes us and the 6 maidens to check on the seal of the Four Sword, opening the gateway to the sanctuary as she does so. which results in Dark Link spawning in from within and stealing away the maidens and the Princess Zelda. It's understood that the seal to the Four Sword and therefore the seal around Vati could not be broken without this entire collection of characters, which means that Zelda here does something really stupid. And the problem with stupidity is that it's considered neglect, and neglect is considered illegal. This means that despite the incursion from Dark Link being worse in this game than Zelda's stupidity, the mess that we end up in during the game ends up being entirely her fault. So let's go through the storyline and I'll explain as we go. Link draws the Four Sword at the beckoning of Dark Link and releases the evil sorcerer. But again, none of this is down to Zelda, is what I want to say, but I'm actually not sure that I can let her get away with this. See, in the case of things like murder, if the killing is accidental, the crime gets bumped down to a case of manslaughter. This is actually the case with Link and the Six Maidens as well. Zelda has called them into this area, where she is aware that there is a dark entity. Yes, it's sealed away, but should the seal break, then the 8 of them would be in direct danger. As a result, Zelda here could and will be charged with 7 counts, not including herself, of reckless endangerment, which all carry a life sentence. But the maidens here of course would have been aware of the risk, and so would the hero. It is, in some respects, their jobs to risk their lives for the safety of Hyrule. So, on this occasion, my gavel stays on its desk and I don't sentence Zelda, despite the fact that she's willing to sacrifice her maidens. Of course though, there's more. Updating the seal and potentially it leading to evil spilling out, which she knows is a possible after effect should they fail in maintaining the seal, puts the entirety of Hyrule at risk. After all, Vati has indeed terrorized Hyrule before, though it's in the game that's released after this, and so the threat is of course recognizable. This means that every single person that is visible within Four Swords Adventure is considered at risk via her reckless endangerment, which means it's time to do the math and count every single person in Hyrule.
In order to be considered at risk, the characters involved must be A, sentient, and B, human or humanoid, so human in shape. So we will not be counting the Deku in this game, for instance, who, while they are bipedal, are still plants in design. However, we should also talk about someone who has been a key part of both Four Swords Adventure and also the Zelda series as a whole.
Who's that Pokemon?
Kaepora Gaebora, who appears and tells us about the adventure we need to go on. This is an odd one as he is an anthropomorphic owl and is later confirmed in the series as being Rauru the Sage of Light.
That being in mind, it would be the owl version of him that will be put in danger here, and it remains to be seen as to whether or not he transforms directly into the owl or possesses the body of an owl as a sage. Yeah, this one is confusing, but I can look back to the Ganon video and clear something up at the same time here. See, I refused at the time and still refuse to acknowledge the Deku Tree as a human. This one confused a lot of you in the comments, but the logic is this. Let's say you have an animal. Let's say then someone is hunting that animal. For argument's sake, then the person hunting the animal goes to pull the trigger and suddenly the animal cries out in English begging not to be killed. If the hunter then goes on to pull the trigger in this hypothetical situation, the kill wouldn't actually count as the killing of a human being, but of an animal still. If there are hunting laws applicable, then it's the hunting law that is contravened, not murder. And therefore, despite his sentience, Deku Tree would be treated as a felled tree, not as a human, which is why I didn't sentence Gandalf for putting a giant spider inside of the tree. So, by the standard that I've created, I have to treat Kaepora Gaebora as an owl and not as a human. Now, Kaepora Gaebora is modelled after the Great Horned Owl, which aren't indigenous to the UK but is a bird of prey, which there are laws against hunting in the UK. The issue here is that Zelda isn't directly hunting him but has put him in danger, likely environmental danger that would have been caused by Vati's release, and therefore she earned herself 6 months. So now that the bird is out of the way, let's talk people. I separated this into 2 groups, friendly and enemy. Friendly characters are mainly going to be Hyrulean with a few exceptions for Goron. And I know this sounds like I'm counting one and not the other, and it is a conflict, but it's done deliberately as the Goron are humanoid at least, whereas the Deku just aren't. Enemies are going to be Hyrulean soldiers who have been possessed by Vati. This is confirmed on the Zelda fandom wiki. Not exactly the most reliable of sources of information that we have to go on, but these are indeed Hyrulean soldiers and it makes sense based on the setting of the game. This means that all soldiers, including the ball and chain guards, are counted. The only other enemies in this game that are humanoid are these guys, the little annoying shits known as the Wizroad. Again, I did a little bit of digging as Wizroad changed dramatically depending on the title. In some games they appear more humanoid, in others they look like toucans, and I settled on the idea that in 4 Swords Adventure, they look like little people wearing robes, so I'm going to go with humanoid and therefore they can. So that being said, I went through every single screen. I didn't count any enemy twice, even on respawn, nor did I count any NPC more than once. And this number genuinely shocked me, and may well be the single biggest sentence given to any character in the entirety of the series. No lie, no bait. Because Zelda, in 4 Swords Adventure, puts the life of 112 people at risk within the game itself. 112 innocent lives are put at risk. Because she feels she needs to check the seal on the sword, which in turn she breaks. And a whopping 373 soldiers on Wizrobe are also put at risk. Also, she sends Link to go and send the maidens, putting them all directly in harm. Not only that, but as the soldiers are her own people from her own castle, she in effect orders the execution of these soldiers because they've been temporarily mind-controlled. We then don't hear or see from Zelda again until we rescue her from the Tower of Winds, where she then tells you to head to the Realm of the Heavens. So you head to the top of the tower, you use your 4 sword powers, and look, I don't want to sound like a tinfoil hat kind of guy, but I'm being told that a kid that's split into 4 is being beamed directly into the heavens, and I'm immediately thinking that Zelda has probably helped lead Link directly to his death. Look, the good news here is Link isn't dead, so she gets away with the charge of assisting Link with unaliving himself. And this means I'm going to take this Realm of the Heavens to mean something more akin to the Sky Islands from Tears of the Kingdom, in that it's an area based in the heavens, as in up high. She then reappears towards the end of the game where you're fighting an endless barrage of Dark Links. She seals their entrance portal, stopping more resurrections, which again, not a crime. I mean, back in the day witchcraft would have been a severe crime that invoked death, but now there's no such laws. So Zelda gets away with no crime committed. After the fight, she seals the Dark Links away, before sending Link after Vati, over a rainbow bridge that she summons. This of course means that she's willing to send Link to his death again, giving her yet another life sentence. You fight the giant eyeball of doom, and then in typical Zelda fashion the tower gives way under Vati's magic, before he forms back up in boar form and vows revenge on us. So we run, escape and destroy enemies while Zelda just kind of stands there as a hopeless damsel figure. I'm actually really glad that this trope is disappearing in Zelda games because I'm just kind of tired of it. But my own personal disdain towards this doesn't equal the crime, as she has no actual legal obligation to get involved. So we get to the bottom of the tower and the floor gives way, and just our good princess is left standing against the giant ball of gas. She attempts to seal it away, assuming it's Vati, and is sorely mistaken when she ends up in an electrified magic spell having fed directly into Ganon's power. Ganon rises up and gets really angry at the 4 Links, attempting to kill him. Link nearly beats him in battle, but not before Zelda returns, breaking the magic seal around her, where she comes up with the idea to use her magic against Ganon, enabling the Links to seal him inside of a sword within the power of the 6 maidens. A lot goes on in this ending sequence. First of all, she's running around with this weird ball of light, also known as her light powers. I don't remember the last time someone went around running around with a giant ball of light, but I'm going to hazard a guess at this being potentially some form of weapon of mass destruction, based on this. As it connects with Ganon. These swirls, the fact that Ganon is on fire, I don't have much to go on here, but it looks overly dangerous, and therefore I'm going to give the princess a charge that I genuinely didn't think would come up for Zelda. In addition to everything she's done so far, is guilty of terrorism and use of a biological or chemical weapon. Which of these this light power remains to be seen, but it's also relatively important. And we're also going to charge her with the attempted murder of Ganon. Sure, this power ends up sealing him, but the guy is literally on fire right here. I'm gonna guess that could be deadly. There are 3 life sentences for her based on this one action alone. And then there's this part of the sequence here. The entire light power gets sealed into the 4 sword. If we're talking about this light power being either a chemical or biological weapon, then sealing it inside the sword here creates a brand new weapon of mass destruction. So therefore, Zelda gets yet another life sentence. This time for the creation of a weapon of mass destruction. The good news is, it is sealed away here inside of a light prism, so there's no intent to use it. But the creation of this is still enough to convict her. With that, we've now run pretty much through the entirety of 4 Swords Adventure, and in all honesty, this princess is pretty wild in terms of her sentence. First of all, I want to sit and appreciate that this Zelda gives us some crimes that are not befitting of royalty at all. Terrorism, creating weapons of mass destruction, and of course, Zelda's answer to Ganon's treason, reckless endangerment. As a total, she gets an absolutely insane 488 life sentences and 6 months in prison, which doesn't just put this Zelda at the very top of the worst offenders list, it's going to make it almost impossible to beat her. But let's try anyway. It's probably best to travel far and wide to find a more evil princess than this one. So let's get the train. A part of the reason why I love making these videos is that it forces me to play Zelda games that I haven't ever played before. There aren't many of them, but Spirit Tracks is one, and I've got to put a little bit more respect on this short king's name. Spirit Tracks is a sequel to Phantom Hourglass, but doesn't use the same incarnation of Link and Zelda. It's made perfectly clear at the start of the game that Spirit Tracks is set 100 years after Phantom Hourglass, and therefore uses Tetra's predecessor. Zelda starts off in this game by issuing you with your train lessons before slipping you a little something extra for your troubles. It's not a bribe though. It's a letter from her explaining that she wants you to take the secret exit out of the castle and she wants you to meet her in her bedroom. Link isn't getting lucky here though. Instead, he's about to be roped into the adventure of a lifetime, starting with Zelda running away. Now, this time her running away is a little different to her escaping previously, where beforehand she's a prisoner, imprisoned by whomever is running the sovereign estate at that moment in time, usually Ganondorf. Zelda is in fact seemingly on the throne in Spirit Tracks. I say that as there's no sign of or mention of a king or queen, despite Zelda being named as a princess. But looking at that appears to be more of a tradition, if anything, within Hyrule. Case in point here, Ocarina of Time. The king is seemingly killed during the transformation of Hyrule Castle by Ganondorf, leaving Zelda as heir apparent. This would make her the Queen of Hyrule, not the princess, but she never takes that mantle, and it's only actually in Tears of the Kingdom recently that the term Queen was used for the first time as a position within the monarchy of Hyrule. But prior to this, it seems as if possibly being due to the fact that Princess Zelda being known as such throughout her entire life, that she elects to remain as Princess Zelda rather than become Queen Zelda. So the current apparent queen leaves her castle despite being told not to by her counsellor, who is there to advise her not make rulings for her. He does quite clearly overstep his mark, and Zelda is obviously a bit of a pushover as a ruler as she adheres to most of his instruction, but this once he decides to go against him and runs away from home. She's not a prisoner, as she rules the country. She picks up no law breakages here, but as the two sneak out, one law does get broken. During this sequence, Zelda requests that Link dresses as one of the guards. However, Link here is an engineer, not a guard, and as such, is pretending to be someone that he's not. Now, there isn't actually a law against impersonation unless the people being impersonated are a government official or police. Castle guards in this instance would have the same powers of arrest as police would, so we could classify this as an impersonation of a police officer, and according to the Police Act 1996, this gives Zelda her first 6 months in jail. When we finally escape, Zelda convinces Alfonso to take you and her to the Tower of Spirits, where it's revealed that he was in fact the captain of the castle guard. As you set out, the train tracks under your little engine that could disappear and leave you stranded, which is where Chancellor Cole and his flunky Byrne approach you. Alfonso takes his former post seriously and fights Byrne, which leads to Zelda's second and third sentences. Alfonso was formerly the captain of the castle guard, but is now a train engineer. He, as a result, actually is fighting Byrne here, no longer as a member of the Royal Guard, and as such Zelda puts him in direct danger by the virtue of her requesting that he take her on her journey. She also puts Link in direct danger as well. This Zelda is pretty good at it. You'll see a bit later on, but as it stands, this incarnation of Link doesn't even have a weapon at this point in time, and she's already having him escort her on a dangerous mission that he didn't need to get involved with. By implicating the two in her affairs, she directly puts both of their lives at risk, giving her 2 more life sentences. From this point in time, Zelda actually acts as your companion throughout the game. She's seemingly killed, or her spirit is separated from her body by Cole and her body is stolen, while her spirit remains. During her time as a spirit, she literally tags along with Link, hiding upon his person as a spiritual orb until the time comes where he needs her help. This means, just like Midna, Spirit Zelda is an accessory to every single crime that train driver Link commits. Now, there is one little thing to address here before we start counting the both of their crimes, and that's the fact that in this instance, unlike Midna, Zelda isn't actually in a physical form, and as a result, it's going to be pretty hard to charge her with crimes. After all, we kind of need to treat her as if she's popped her little princess clogs. In respect of that, Zelda really shouldn't face any charges after she loses her body. However, Zelda is missing her body, and she is in complete faculty of her mind. There's no mindlessness going on here, rather she's completely aware of everything that's going on, including when her own phobias, for instance, rats, are triggered. She acts as if she has been in her body during this game and therefore is of completely sound mind. This means that we're looking more of a case of a prolonged out-of-body experience than a death. One of the comments from my Ganon video, from Leg1Less, helped clarify what I'm about to state now. In order to commit a crime, you must have both actus reus, or a guilty act, and mens rea, or guilty mind, in order to have committed a crime. And in this instance, while her body is separate to her mind, Zelda's mind is definitely out there committing carnage that she will be charged for when she returns to her mortal body. So we head off and get a sword from the new captain of the guard, who gives us one without even thinking, this kid is a literal kid? Before we head up through the back door of the castle. We get to the big Jubilo Tower and Zelda tries to intimidate us, but in her ghost form it kind of falls flat. But she does repeatedly get in Link's face, pushing him backwards, though if he didn't move she would surely just phase through him. Either way, this is controlling or coercive behaviour and lands Zelda with a maximum sentence of 5 years. As we head through the tunnel to the Tower of Spirits, we encounter one of Zelda's biggest phobias. Rats. It's at this point where she literally turns tail and runs, leaving Link to fend for himself. A newly trained, inexperienced child with a sword, against a ferocious horde of rats that won't stop until their nest is literally blocked. While we're looking at these little pests though, let's go through every enemy in the game. Because Spirit Tracks is actually an interesting one. As it's one of the last ones in the timeline split as it were, we have a lot of potential enemies that won't be ever seen again in the Zelda universe. In fact, 26 species in general never appear again in Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, and those are the only 2 games that technically come after Spirit Tracks in the timeline. And there are 2 species that will change dramatically and are in fact no longer enemies. Those 2 are the Bulbo, whose core appearance is by and largely the same as in Breath of the Wild, but they're just named as boars, leading me to believe that these survived tens of thousands of years between the game of Trains and the game of Plains, but became moderately less aggressive and their names changed, likely due to language colloquialisms. These crows are the other species which retain the same name in Breath of the Wild but are considered a lot smaller and a whole lot less aggressive, to the point where really they're just there to help the world feel more alive than actually being active parts of the game. Aside from these 2 species, we have got, and brace yourself for this list, Blastworms, Bubbles, Urterox, Firebabber, Geozard and their counterpart Geozard Chiefs, Garoon, Spinets, Heatoys, Keymasters, Low Barriers, Malgeorgs, Mini-Blimp, Mothula, Octave, Octomine, all of the varieties of Phantom, Rats, Tektites and Rocktites, Skulltula, Red Skulltula, Surfrosties, Snappers, Snurgles, Snurglers, Stalfos Warriors, Vengers, White Wolfos, and all 3 variation of Choo-Choo, which actually gives us the single biggest list of potential extinct creatures that never make a reappearance later on in the game. So with all of those species named, there's one teeny tiny bit of housekeeping to cover here, which is that I only counted enemies if there was no way whatsoever of avoiding the fights or just stunning the enemies. This means Skulltulas, for instance, have been put out of commission by Link, or they may or may not have been, because the recommended way of getting rid of these is just to blow your horn. A Red Skulltula, Link has to kill via his trusty cannon. His cannon. Link has an engineer's license here, which wouldn't necessarily combat the firearms license. However, the cannon is mounted and fitted by a former member of the Royal Guard, meaning that he would have access to a license for the cannon. Assuming that as an engineer it is deemed legal to have a gun mounted onto your train for self-defense, I think that we could probably make a case that both Link and Zelda avoid a 5-year sentence, based on the notion that the engineer's license also includes the ability to possess firearms. Octaves, Octomine, Surfrosties, Snurglers, Snurgles and Skulltula never actually have to be killed while we're on the rails. We can just zip right past them. When we're in the overworld, the same can be said for low barriers, which only ever need to be stunned, but you do have to stun them. So I'll need to go back at the end to add on at least 4 counts of animal abuse. This leaves throughout the rest of the game 5 Blastworms, 2 Bubbles, 3 Urterox, 5 Firebabber, 8 Geozards and Chiefs, 9 Garoon, 7 Spinenuts, 3 Heatoys, 16 various Choo-Choo, 6 Keymasters, 1 Mothula, 8 Octaves, 4 Rats, 4 Tektites or Rocktites, 2 Red Skulltula, 3 Snappers, 33 Stalfos, 4 Vengers, 4 White Wolfos, and due to this train invasion sequence, a huge 44 mini blin. I'm not even counting the boss from that sequence either, the big blin. Because when you put him and the boss bokoblins together from Tears of the Kingdom, it's really easy to see that they could in fact be the same thing, even down to their command of smaller subspecies of their kind. This gives us 185 counts of endangering animals, giving the pair a strong census of 92.5 years. This leaves the quandary surrounding the phantoms themselves. I would assume, as they're called phantoms, and as they seem to be separate from the actual armor they possess, which therefore means when they're defeated they'd leave the host bodies, allowing Zelda to take over, that this is a name that is indeed only given to the spiritual entity that adorns what looks like Dark Knight armor. As such, I think these two are killing ghosts at this point. So phantoms and anything related to phantoms, I am going to ignore. In addition to their antics when it comes to killing wildlife, there are at least 2 instances of Link either using or keeping bombs on his person. Bombs are not the same as a gunpowder license and require an explosive license, which I'm pretty sure Link doesn't have. Where he's using bombs to clear out rock and debris, it's not an issue as explosives can be used for archaeological use. But even just purchasing the bombs can be seen as a criminal offence. There are also 4 cases to be had against Link and Zelda for breaking and entering. While they are expected in each of the locomotive sanctuaries, all are hidden behind locked doors which Link usually has to solve a puzzle to enter into. This would therefore infer that they were keeping people out of their sanctuaries, and as a result, Link and Zelda have broken into their homes. Carbon is actually probably the best example of this, as we break into his house while he's not even there. Despite leaving a note for us, he's still locked his door, damn it. There's also a count of assault we need to address as Link faces off against Byrne. Sure, here Byrne attacks Link, and in his possession are both a mechanized hand and magical ability, which in comparison to Link's sword seems like a fairish exchange, so I think we can count this as self-defense. But we do have to bear in mind that Zelda is not attacked by Byrne, and she does get involved in the fight nonetheless. Zelda, as a result, gets a direct sentence here relating to grievous bodily harm, based on the fact that Byrne never truly recovers from this fight, and even changes his entire outlook on life. So in short, the Zelda retrains actually racks up a really impressive sentence for such a short game, 4 life sentences and 156 years in jail. With that being said, we have 1 more Zelda to deal with. This one's going to be really spoiler heavy though. So skip to the timestamp on the screen now if you don't want spoilers for Echoes of Wisdom, because I know that some of you still haven't played it. Then go do that after finishing the end of the video, and subscribing, and all that good stuff. Okay, so before we get the jump on Echo Zelda and put her behind bars, we're going to need to take a few new things into account with this princess. Because she's the protagonist, she's going to be treated more like how Link will be in the coming videos, which will serve as a bit of a preview for that. In regards to that, we're going to have to lay down a few new ground rules once again. Firstly is the elephant in the room. How do I deal with Zelda, the first of our cretins, entering people's homes and destroying their property? Well, I hate to tell you this because this ruins all of our fun for Link. But I don't, because the damage would be considered minor, and as a result, our princess would get a monetary fine of how much the pots are worth and whatever she steals from them. Even stealing the rupees while theft doesn't get a sentence here because again the amount is so minor that it would only invoke a fine. Next is that I could easily charge her with anti-littering laws from the off, and really end up blowing the sentence sky high. But the items that she's firing out of that rod of hers disappear in order for her to continue summoning. So before anyone could sentence her for leaving beds everywhere, she'd have already cleaned up her rubbish. Also, I will not be counting any echoes at Zelda fights at all. You can quite easily see and differentiate between the two. The echoes are shadowed, often purple and black, while the non-echoes, well, can actually become echoes. So if it's colourful and become an echo, we will presume it's real. If it's black sludgy and comes out of these bubbles, it is probably not. Finally, on the note of real or not real, I will be counting all of these crimes based on things that these players should all have to encounter when playing the game, and therefore making it as close to canon as possible. That means no secret rooms or caves we don't need to do, no optional extras whatsoever, just the game, the dungeons, and the events within the game. So, let's start at the beginning. Zelda breaks her first law here, where she's put in prison by a false version of her own father. She, and no one else at the moment, knows though that he's an echo, and as such as the acting ruler, she breaks free. I'm going to admit this was never going to hold any hardened criminal. I mean, there's a hole at the top of the freaking goddamn wall. Still, she's broken out of jail, which is an immediate 10 years, and then goes on to hide from the castle guard, meaning that, just like Midna, she's lawfully at large, giving her an extra 2. And that's actually evident from the fact that there are wanted posters in Hyrule Town with her face on it. As she finishes her escape, Impa comes along and takes out these guards as well, who have no idea that she's there. This is, impressive, but it's also a form of assault. And because she's aiding a felon, the felon would also receive a part of the sentence, in that she's technically an accessory to this assault. So now we have to work out what type of bodily harm this is. If the effects are long-lasting, causing permanent damage, then we're looking at GBH. If not, then it's ABH. Now, I don't know for sure if we ever see these 3 exact guards in the game, because let's face facts here, all the guards in this game look identical. As such, I'm going to presume that, yeah, we probably do see them again as part of the castle guard. And I'm also going to say that ninjas in general are very skilled martial artists who would know how to knock out an enemy with no trace. So let's give Impa the nod here, meaning Zelda only gets 5 years per assault, as per the sentencing guidelines on actual bodily harm, giving her 15 years in prison. Later on in Soothorn Ruins, she has to pull a shield off of a statue in order to activate a door. However, these ruins I'm pretty sure at least would be deemed as an archaeological site, and as a result, doing so results in her actually destroying a part of said site. Under new laws passed in 2017, damaging an archaeological site can be seen in the eyes of the law as criminal damage, which would get Zelda sent to the clink for a ridiculous 7 years. Through this dungeon, she then runs into an Echo of Link. As stated before, Echoes in their game do not count as enemies, so there's no assault here. But what there is what comes directly after the fight. Zelda picks up Link's sword, and I'm not 100% convinced that there is any intention for her to return it to him, so she ends up with not just 1 charge here but 2. The first being theft and a 7-year stint for that, and another for what she'll do when she leaves Soothorn Ruins, which is brandishing a bladed weapon in public, giving her 4 years. While we're here, let's also deal with these 2 instances of thefts too, with Zelda stealing Link's bow and bomb bag, which also presents us with a case for conspiracy to commit terrorism, as she could easily use these as a weapon and not just blow through purple void webs. That's a life sentence there, along with her 14 years that she gets to go away for. As we get a little bit further through the game, we should probably talk about what she gets up to in Jabal Ruins. There's this one puzzle in particular where you have to burn down a load of boxes in order to get this switch to open this door, and to get to the next floor of the dungeon. Unfortunately for Zelda, this ends up in one of the most insane life sentences ever, as she's not actually doing any harm by destroying these boxes, but she is also committing deliberate arson, which is considered one of the instant life sentence crimes in the UK, along with murder. In or around Jabal Ruins as well, Zelda also echoes a creature which she will use multiple times throughout the game. It is an echo that I would deem as relatively crucial to the game's progress, in the bombfish. However, this is a bomb, and Zelda does not have an explosives license, and it's unclear what her motives for having this disturbing form of wildlife upon her are. So that means we're going to have to presume she's going to use it as a weapon. If it's usable as a weapon, that means she gets a charge for terrorism, and that means another life sentence for her. Generally though, this Zelda is pretty wholesome, especially when we get up to Hebra Peaks and meet Kunde, who is just so adorable. Or just look at him shoveling, right up until you go inside what is clearly a storehouse for his family belongings.
And destroy everything inside!
Now, I personally use fire here in the form of an Ignazol. That doesn't mean that everyone did this when playing, though the ice here kind of tells you to, so I'm going to count this one as criminal damage, which updates her tally by 7 years. Zelda's final charges in this game's storyline at least come from the Farron section of the game, where she's put in prison for, well, seemingly not being a Deku. She of course breaks out again, but as we've seen in other games, the Deku tribe are seemingly ruled over by their own king. This of course isn't confirmed in Echoes, but it is in Majora's Mask, and there's almost always a leadership figure within these forest biome dwellers. The Kokiri have the Deku tree. The Kikwi have, well, this big guy. Even the Perella later on have the Lanayru water dragon. So I think it's safe to assume that there is leadership here, even if it's not directly in the game. As a result of her breaking out, she gets once again another 10 years, and another 2 for being lawfully at large once again. So Zelda in total here picks up a actually pretty underwhelming 3 life sentences and 68 years in jail for her crimes, which puts her 4th from the bottom on the list of villainous princesses. But one more thing, this is the first Zelda where you play as Zelda.
You dare defy me? You will die!
Guess again, Iron Knuckle.
He's dead. Let's get out of here.
And therefore you kill enemies as Zelda, which means we have to look at every single enemy in the game, and how many enemies are? Oh, Zelda's main crime in this game is actually how many creatures she has to kill in order to progress through the game. There are a lot of new enemies in this game, and a lot of returning ones too. But with our ground rules in place, we treat humanoids like humans and animals like they're being hunted. Unless they never appear in the next games or series, we actually managed to eliminate a large number of enemies. One addition to this is that the game has a lot of sentient machinery and weather conditions. Anything that looks like machinery, I think we can say is abandoned tech, so let's walk away from that despite the fact that some of these creatures clearly have expressions. And while we're at it, so that I don't overinflate the count even further, if it looks like a snowball or icicle or any other weather condition that shouldn't have sentience, it's probably not a creature. And if we don't need to kill it in advance, assume I walk straight past it. I'm also judging echoes on the fact that these enemies no longer appear in the rest of the timeline, so they don't appear in Zelda 1, Link's Awakening, Breath of the Wild, or Tears of the Kingdom. Heading through the game, and therefore every dungeon, I found that Zelda's count is still pretty wild despite those restrictions. I found without attempting anything like a pacifist run, that she needs to kill 2 Buzz Blobs, 16 Borblin, which I will count as a separate species to Moblin which appear later on in the series, just because Borblin haven't specifically reappeared, 4 Carmadillos, 3 Tornandus, 5 Driffatune, 3 Torch Slugs, 5 Freeze Slugs, 3 Holmel, 8 Wolfos, 3 Mothula, 3 Needlefly, 1 Albatroll, 1 Beacon, 7 Fire Octos, 6 Ice Octos, 2 Sea Urchins, 3 Sand Crabs, 10 Birri, 12 Tanglers, 7 Bombfish, 3 Chompfins, 11 Sand Piranha, a huge 30 Dekubaba, which I personally find insane that they've never reappeared after this stage in the timeline again, 3 Peahat, 3 giant Gopongo flowers, 3 Gyro, 4 Mini Moldorm, 4 Strangula, 3 Crawchula, a massive 30 Baby Goma, because yeah, everyone hates spiders, 11 Beetle, 4 Araruda, 4 Hoarders, 2 Moa, 1 Ball and Chain Troop, and 8 Darknuts. So in terms of sentencing for this, I broke it down into 3 categories. Anything animal-based would face a sentence for species endangerment, while anything plant-based such as Dekubaba would be based on conservation law and killing protected plants. Both of these face a 6-month sentence per count, whilst anything humanoid would face charges of murder. And as we know that the Darknuts and the Ball and Chain Troopers are castle guards, or at least royal guards to some degree, this corroborates completely. As a result of this, Zelda faces another 115.5 years in jail, along with 9 further murder charges, giving her a grand total of 12 life sentences, 193 years and 6 months in prison, putting her just ahead of Breath of the Kingdom Zelda, but massively below the Deviants of Twilight. Just because I know you guys will ask too, because there's a doppelganger in this game that goes by the name of Tecom, I opted to actively disqualify Tecom from this list entirely. Because, yes, okay, she's impersonating Zelda, but in reality, she's actually a form of Zelda created from her time in the Rifts. Therefore, Tecom isn't real, just like the other Echoes, and this goes for every boss in the game too, who are also Echoes. Whew, holy hell, it has taken 2 videos, around 2 months of research, 5 months of editing, but we're here. And I can finally present to you who the worst Zelda out of every other single canon game is. And shockingly, it's 4 Sword Adventure Zelda, with a huge 488 life sentences and 6 months behind bars. Behind her are the Zelda of Time with 120 life sentences and 19 years, Midna with 77 life sentences, 354 years and 10 months in prison, the Zelda of Wisdom with 12 life sentences, 139 years and 6 months in prison, and finally rounding out our baddest bitch list is the Tears of the Wild Zelda, with 5 life sentences and 200 years. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So much goes into these videos, and I only really feel gratified if my subscriber number goes up because, yeah, I'm just that shallow. I'll see you next time.